17. Understanding the writings. Now that we've covered the theory, I will give you a short glossary to aid you in understanding the alchemical books in case you choose to study them further. You should now have a good idea about the principles of nature which operate on the development of the stone, and this should be enough to understand the alchemical writings. However, I will help you out by explaining the meaning of the words used by the alchemists. Unfortunately, the alchemists were in the habit of not only using several words for one thing, but also using one word for several things, and different alchemists used each word to mean different things. So you still have to work out the meaning according to the context, which you will be able to do with an understanding of the natural process. Some of the alchemists made up their own words and symbols, so all I can cover here are the commonly used words. The following should not be considered definitions, but merely a rough guide to help you to understand some of the ways the alchemists have used these words. Mercury usually represents distilled urine, or the stone itself at any stage of the process, or just urine. More rarely used to represent the white salt. Sulfur usually represents either the white salt, or any impure substance not needed. Sometimes used to represent the stone at any stage of the process, alkahest. The stone, red or white. Amalgam. The definition is an alloy. In alchemy it represents when two things are combined into one, such as the beginning of the second part of the process, or the stone at any stage. Aqua fortis. Nitric acid, which is never used in alchemy. Sometimes it can mean the same as mercury. Aqua vitae, living water, same as mercury. Argent vive, same as mercury. Art. Alchemy. Body, usually represents the white salt, or the stone at any stage, or anything else which makes up the bulk of whatever you're dealing with. Book of nature. The world itself. To learn by experience and observation of nature. Calcine, calcination. To dry, traditionally with strong dry heat, but the alchemists sometimes use it to refer to a drying with gentle heat. Cinnabar, same as mercury. Coagulate, coagulation. A liquid becoming a solid. Conjunction. The joining together of two things, e.g. the white salt and distilled urine. Common. Something referred to as common means it's the normal substance, without any metaphor, e.g. common gold. Crow represents the black, putrefaction stage of the process, dew. Same as mercury. Digestion. Same as putrefy. Distill, distillation. To evaporate and condense. In alchemy this is always done with low heat. Dove usually represents the white stone, or sometimes the distilled urine. Eagles represents distillation, elixir. The stone, white or red. Fermentation. When the white or red stone is mixed with silver or gold respectively, first matter. Either urine, or the life energy. Gold sometimes represents normal gold, otherwise represents either the red stone, or the white salt, or the stone at any part of the process. Great work. The process of making the stone. Hermaphrodite. When the white salt and distilled urine have been combined. Hermetically sealed. An airtight seal. Imbibe, imbibition. To absorb moisture until saturated. King usually represents the red stone. Lead, normal lead, or same as sulfur. Lion, a metaphor for something difficult to overcome, or sometimes used to represent the black mass of the urine, which has the white salt inside it. Living, same as are, also implies the substance contains life energy, or has been changed by an alchemical process. E.g., living gold, depending on the context, could represent urine, the white salt, or the stone at any stage. Magnesia, same as mercury. Moon, lunar, feminine principle, usually represents the white stone, or the distilled urine, even though some alchemists consider the distilled urine to be the masculine principle. Can also represent silver, multiplication, when the stone is increased in quantity and/or quality. Of the sages. A word with, of the sages, after it is a clue that the previous word is a metaphor, e.g., Mercury of the sages. Hour. A word with, hour, Before it is a clue that the following word is a metaphor, e.g., our Mercury, pelican. The vessel, not a special vessel as some think, just a normal round one. Philosophical, same as our, e.g., philosophical Mercury. Phoenix, a mythological bird said to live hundreds of years, then die in a ball of fire, from which it is born again from the ashes. This symbol represents nature's process of generation from corruption. All things must be destroyed before they can further develop. This fundamental concept applies to all things, including our stone, and our civilization. In alchemy, the symbol usually represents the red stone, or the entire process itself. Projection, when the stone is used to turn metals into silver or gold, putrefy, putrefaction. Breaking down, decomposition, queen, usually represents the white stone, quicksilver, same as Mercury. Quintessence, usually represents the active principle, what I am calling life energy. Raven, represents the black, putrefaction, stage of the process, rebus. When the white salt and distilled urine have been combined, salt, usually represents the white salt. Seed, same as common usage, but broader as alchemists insist that everything has a seed, soul, usually represents the life energy. Spirit, distilled urine. Sublime, sublimation, a substance-changing state, such as a solid becoming a liquid, or a liquid becoming a gas. In alchemy, this often means the same as distillation, a liquid becoming a gas and then a liquid again. Each sublimation, changing the state of matter up and then down again, liquid gas liquid, makes the substance purer. Sun, soul, masculine principle, usually represents the red stone, or the white salt. Can also represent gold, tincture. The stone, white or red. Vulcan, Roman god of useful fire. In alchemy, Vulcan's fire is a degree of heat which will cause circulating evaporation and condensation. Vulcan was created as an alchemical symbol, vulgar, same as common. Water, same as Mercury. I will follow with an example. A spirit is given for a time to the body, and that spirit is the life of a soul. If the spirit draws the soul to itself, they are both severed from the body. Then are there three abiding in the same place, until the precious body is dissolved, and is decomposed and dies. But after a time the spirit and the soul are brought back by gentle warmth, and hold once more their former seat. Then you have the essence. No perfection is wanting, and the work is glorified by a joyful end. The Sophie Hydrolith, or Water Stone of the Wise, by Anonymous, 17th Ken. Translation: the urine contains both water and salt, the life energy is in the water. If the water is distilled, the life energy will go with it. The three, salt, distilled urine, life energy, being put together will break down, putrefy, and turn black. But after a time the water is brought back with a moist heat, and all combines. Then you have the stone. It is perfect, and the work is glorified by a joyful end. 18. Overview. The work is easy and the medicine is not far away. If the secret is disclosed, it will be so simple that everyone may get a good laugh. Wu Chen Pian, Essay on the Understanding of Truth, by Changpo Tuan, 1078 AD, Chinese. There are two parts to our great work. Both parts follow the same laws of nature that we addressed in our theory. The first operation, which is done by hand, is the first stage of the work, which consists in sublimation and purification. The second operation, in which the artist has nothing to do but look on, is the second stage of the work. The New Pearl of Great Price, by Peter Bonus, 1338 AD. In the first part we give nature a head start by manually performing some of nature's operations, and removing the densest particles, so as to accelerate the whole process. If you did not perform this first part, the process would still work, but it may well take longer than your lifetime. We will repeatedly distill, with low heat, and calcine the urine, in order to separate it into layers according to density. We will then take only the lightest, most subtle, of the particles, which will be in the form of a white salt, and discard the rest of the body. Then further distill the urine to make it as pure as possible, so only the lightest particles remain. This leaves us at the end of the first part with a white salt, and a well-distilled urine. The first part will take around 3 months. By artificial distillation, the spirit can be separated from phlegmatic wateriness and earthy impurity, a residue remaining. From which residue, after calcinations, is extracted a white salt. An anonymous treatise concerning the Philosopher's Stone, by Anonymous, 12th-17th Ken. In the second part, we combine the salt and distilled urine, hermetically seal them in a vessel of the correct specifications, and let nature do its thing. At this stage we only need to make sure it is subjected to the correct degree of heat. To combine the salt and distilled urine, we heat gently until the salt absorbs and becomes saturated with the distilled urine, which can take up to 1 year, or longer. Then we just need to watch for the matter to putrefy and turn black, then purify and turn white, adjusting the heat accordingly. When the matter turns white, we have the white stone. Reduce the matter, which is 1, to powder, put it, together with its water, in a well-closed vessel, and expose it to continuous, gentle heat, which will then begin to operate, while the moisture favors the decomposition. A Demonstration of Nature, by John A. Mahung, 16th-17th Ken. The white stone can then be fermented with silver in order to stabilize it and make it capable of withstanding higher heat. You can think of this as trapping the life energy inside a material body, the silver. The white stone can be subjected to higher heat, which will mature it into the red stone. The red stone must itself be fermented with gold. Without a proper ferment, the moon cannot become the sun, but the substance, having nothing to prevent it from doing so, will again revert to water. The Epistle of Bonus of Ferrara, by Peter Bonus, 14th Ken. There are no other ferments like these here. The ferment of silver is silver, the ferment of gold is gold, therefore don't look elsewhere. Compound of Compounds, by Albertus Magnus, 13th Ken. You will then have the Philosopher's Stone. It can be multiplied in quality and quantity by repeating the second part, which will be much quicker, or in other ways as will be discussed. For our multiplication, according to Raymundus, is naught but the reiteration of the process of our primordial creation. An explanation of the natural philosopher's tincture, of Paracelsus, by Alexander von Suchten, 16th Ken. 19. Apparatus. Having now covered the theory, we can start with the practical operations for actually making the Philosopher's Stone. You first need to obtain the necessary apparatus. For the first part you will need 2 500 ml retorts for distilling the urine. It is important that this be a retort, and not some modern distillation apparatus. The reason for this is that you are only distilling on low heat, so as not to destroy the life energy. If you try to use modern distillation apparatus, then the water vapor will not rise high enough to escape before it condenses. The reason for the second retort is because you may have to break the first one in order to extract the white salt, and also because the distilled urine will need to be further distilled in a clean retort before moving on to the second part. You will need a 500 ml glass bottle for collecting and storing the distilled urine. For the second part, you will need a round bottom flask in either Kjedal, Florence or boiling flask style. The size you will need will likely be 50 ml, depending on how much of the body you will be using. Try to find one with a long neck. You can use one with a shorter neck, but for this you will have to make sure the ambient, room, temperature is low enough for the water vapor to condense closer to the heat source. The Kjedal flask has an egg-shaped bottom and a long neck, which is perfect for our purpose of imitating the water cycle through evaporation and condensation. But even a normal boiling flask will do the job as long as it has a round bottom. Do not use a flat bottom flask. You will need a pipette for accurately transferring the distilled urine into the flask. You will need stoppers for sealing the flask. For both parts you will need a water bath, with digital temperature control. A water bath is the best heat source. Since the water is all at an even temperature, the lower part of the flask can be immersed in the water, and the temperature can be adjusted very precisely. Get the smallest one you can, It needs only be large enough for the 500 milliliters retort. You will also need a dry heat source for calcining the retort between distillations. You could do this on a portable gas stove or electric hot plate. The calcining will need to be done outside, so you will not be able to use your kitchen stove. You will need a triangle support stand, with the clamp attachments for holding the retort or flask in place over the water bath. If you can afford it, get 2, or more, of everything, just in case. It's also a good idea to get a collection of various bottles, spatulas, stoppers, dishes, mortar and pestle, and other fun things like that, which are not absolutely necessary, but will certainly be very useful. Otherwise you'll have to improvise with what you can find in the kitchen. The glassware, retort and flask, should be made of borosilicate glass, which is pretty much standard these days, so it should not be much trouble to find. Borosilicate glass can stand very high heat without cracking. If you buy the water bath or other electrical items from abroad, be sure to check it works on the same voltage as in your country. If not, you will need to buy a voltage converter as well. If you plug a 110 volts appliance into a 220 volts supply, you could end up burning down your house, so do pay attention to this. The water bath will need to be running 24/7, so if you live in an area with frequent power cuts, I recommend getting a backup generator. Checklist: minimum 1. 2x retort, 500 milliliters. 2. Glass bottle, 500 milliliters. 3. Round bottom flask, 50 milliliters. 4. Pipette. 5. Stoppers. 6. Water bath. 7. Portable stove. 8. Triangle stand. The following quote is a description of the vessel to be used for the second part of the work. The vessel for our stone is but one, in which the whole magistery or elixir is performed and perfected. This 21st part. Collect 500 milliliters of urine, the darker the better, so it's best to collect it from the first time you urinate in the morning. If you don't get enough, then you can top it up during the day, or wait until the next morning. Don't leave the urine in an open container. The urine, must be purged of its watery and earthy nature, for at first it appears an earthy, heavy, thick, slimy, and misty body, and all that is thick, nebulous, opaque, and dark in it must be removed, that thus, by a final sublimation, the heart and inner soul contained in it may be separated and reduced to a precious essence. The Sophic Hydrolith, or water stone of the wise, by Anonymous, 17th Ken. Distill the urine at no more than 175 degrees Fahrenheit, 80 degrees Celsius in the water bath with the retort. It should take 1 to 2 weeks to distill the urine once. Obviously the distillation will be faster if the ambient, room, temperature is lower, though not below freezing. The top opening of the retort should be hermetically sealed. It is best for the retort to be connected to the bottle in which the distilled urine, is to be collected, but it is not absolutely necessary for it to be hermetically sealed at this stage. If the two are not connected, which is likely going to be the case, then you can wrap cling film around where they connect, to stop the distilled urine from evaporating again. Though a hermetic seal is safer, the bottle should not be in the sun. The distillation will be much faster if the bottle is lower than the heat source, which means it might need to be leaned over to one side in order for the neck of the retort to be pointing downwards as much as possible. When the urine is distilled, there will be a nasty black mass in the bottom of the retort, though it may not look black the first time, which needs to be calcined. Take the retort out of the water bath, unplug the top opening, and put it onto high heat, such as on a gas stove. At first make sure the heat is not too high, so that you can evaporate off any liquid still in the retort. If the heat is too high while there is still liquid in the retort, you risk it bubbling up and spilling. When the black mass is completely dry, then increase the heat. Leave it this way for a few hours, until the mass is burnt and cracked. The purpose of the calcination is to burn and destroy the solid part of the urine, in order to extract the salt, which is incombustible. So do not be scared to put the high heat flame, no more than 500 degrees Fahrenheit, 260 degrees Celsius, directly against the glass of the retort and leave it like this for a few hours. You need to really burn the solid matter in the urine, though you should increase the heat slowly at first since glass will crack if heated too rapidly. The first few times you perform the calcination, a nasty smoke will come off it, which will stain everything black and smell really foul, so the calcinations must be done outside. Do not breathe in the smoke, it's poisonous. Do not perform the first few calcinations inside your house or it will become unlivable. When this spirit is drawn off from them they remain as dead earth behind, because they have lost their spirit by distillation. The Chemist's Key, by Henry Nollius, 1617 AD. First, by a light fire equally temperated and continued, water is to be gotten. Then the fire is to be made a little more vigorous and stronger, until the fire be received mixed with the fire. That which remains burned in the bottom is the dry earth where the crystalline salt of the stone leaf hid. The Crowning of Nature, by Anonymous, 16th-17th Ken. It exists under two forms, the moisture which was extracted, and the residuum, being our philosophical earth. The water contains its seminal virtue, and the earth is a proper receptacle, wherein it may fructify. Let the water, then, be separated and kept for use. Calcine the earth, for an impurity adheres to it which can only be taken away by fire, and that, too, of the strongest degree. For here there is no danger of destroying the seminal quality, and our earth must be highly purified before it can ripen the seed. On the Philosopher's Stone, by Anonymous, 12th-17th Ken. On your first distillation, only distill half of the urine, and then calcine the remaining half, allowing the lower half of the urine to just evaporate away in the high heat. Calcine the remaining urine until it is dry and cracked. Now you will have 250 milliliters of urine distilled once. For your second distillation, collect another 500 milliliters of fresh urine from the first time you urinate in the morning. Pour this onto the calcined urine at the bottom of the same retort. Again, distill only half of the urine, and calcine the remaining. You will now have 500 milliliters of urine distilled once. The reason for the first two distillations to be done in this way is so that you can obtain 1 liter worth of the body of the urine in order to get more white salt. The reason you distill only the first half from both batches of urine is so that the distilled urine contains the lightest particles. This is not entirely necessary but will make your distillate purer and therefore accelerate the process. In an older version of this book I recommended using a 1 liter retort for the distillation, as I used. I have changed the instructions as the distillation will be more efficient using a 500 milliliters retort, and also because 500 milliliters retorts are cheaper and easier to find. But if you already have a 1 liter retort you can use this, it'll just take a little longer. For all further distillations, pour the distilled urine back onto the calcined body in the retort, distill the distilled urine again, then calcine again. You should distill the first 90% of the distilled urine each time, and just evaporate away the remaining 10% before the calcination, so after every distillation you will have slightly less than the time before. Pour the same distilled urine back on again, distill again, calcine again. Repeat the distillation, calcination again and again. At the end you should have 100 to 150 milliliters of distilled urine, which is around 10% of the original volume of urine. Know, my brother, that the exact preparation of the eagles of the sages is the highest effort of our art. In this first section of our work, nothing is to be done without hard and persevering toil, though it is quite true that afterwards the substance develops under the influence of gentle heat without any imposition of hands. The sages tell us that their eagles must be taken to devour the lion, and that they gain the victory all the sooner if they are very numerous. Also that the number of the work varies between 7 and 9. The Mercury of the sages is the bird of Hermes, now called a goose, now a pheasant. But the eagles are always mentioned in the plural, and number from 3 to 10. Yet this is not to be understood as if there should be so many weights or parts of the water to one of the earth, but the water must be taken so oftentimes actuated or sharpened as there are eagles numbered. This actuation is made by sublimation, distillation. There is, then, one sublimation, distillation, of the mercury of the sages, when one eagle is mentioned, and the seventh sublimation will so strengthen your mercury, that the bath of your king will be ready. An open entrance to the closed palace of the king, by an anonymous sage and lover of truth, 1645 AD. This compositum then has its mundification or cleaning, by our moist fire, which by dissolving and subliming that which is pure and white, it cast forth its feces or filth like a voluntary vomit, for in such a dissolution and natural sublimation or lifting up, there is a loosening or untying of the elements, and a cleansing and separating of the pure from the impure. So that the pure and white substance ascends upwards and the impure and earthy remains fixed in the bottom of the water and the vessel. This must be taken away and removed, because it is of no value, taking only the middle white substance, flowing and melted or dissolved, rejecting the feculent earth, which remains below in the bottom. These feces were separated partly by the water, and are the dross and terra damnata, which is of no value, nor can do any such service as the clear, white, pure and clear matter, which is holy and only to be taken and made use of. The Secret Book of Artephius, by Artephius, 12th Ken. 9 parts often, or thereabouts, distilled from fresh urine are to be rejected, the 10th part, as much as can be extracted in form of liquor, is to be kept. From that dried urine which remains in the bottom by a gentle fire, which will not cause sublimation, let the salt be extracted with water. The secret of the immortal liquor called alkahest, by Irenaeus Philalethes, 17th Ken. After a few distillations you will see a white salt forming on top of the black mass. When calcining this there will be a sweet flowery chemical smell given off. Keep repeating the distillations and calcinations until the whole surface is white and it has formed into large enough crystals for you to separate it from the black mass. This may take up to 10 distillations, or it could be much less. When its impurity is purged away, it emits a most sweet fragrance. The Glory of the World, or Table of Paradise, by Anonymous, 1526 AD. As this mercury hath been by some one sublimed, it hath appeared clothed with so great whiteness as the snow on the highest mountains, under a most subtle, crystalline splendor, from whence proceeds at the opening of the vessel, so great, so sweet, so excellent an odor. Verbum dismissum, by Count Bernard Trevisan, 15th Ken. If you have already distilled the urine 10 times and you don't think you have enough of the white salt, then you can stop the distillations and just continue the calcinations, pouring distilled water on top of the mass instead of the distilled urine. When you see enough of the white salt has formed on top, which are the lightest of the particles, you need to extract them, which may require breaking the retort. If you do need to break the retort, then wrap tape around the bottom half of the retort, and try to just break the glass at the top, keeping the bottom half intact. Remove the white salt and separate any impurities from it. Try not to touch it with your fingers, or it will sting them. You should further distill the distilled urine 3 times in the clean retort. Congratulations! You now have the mercury, distilled urine, and sulfur, white salt, of the sages. I really recommend spending extra time on the first part to ensure that the white salt and distilled urine are extremely well purified. If you skip a couple of distillations at this stage, you won't have saved time, you'll have made the second part take months longer.